All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for a podcast number 64.
On the rule of cool.
The rule of cool. Yare yare does it.
And this is the Twitch VOD. Yeah.
The Twitch VOD, yes. So yeah, enjoy guys.
Hello. Hello everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome to madness.
Yes.
Now, we may have the Jotaro hats, but we aren't necessarily going to be talking about JoJo's. We will be talking about many things.
We'll be talking about many things.
Yeah, many cool things.
Today, we delve into the mystery, the legendary phrase that is the rule of cool. What does it mean? What is it? How is it applied?
Yes. Can it truly be quantified or pinned down? Or
Yes.
is it just too cool even for that?
Right, exactly. The Abstemious Ascetic, thank you so much for the follow. Glad to have you here.
That is quite the name.
That is quite the name indeed. Yes, definitely something special there for
Hello
you.
everyone.
Peps 2! Welcome. Stop Platinum! Rule of Cool, finally a podcast about Dandy. Kind of weird to have one before watching the show, though.
Yeah. That's
Keep trying.
But I mean, like that's just another great example of the fact that the rule of cool exists and that it's amazing and that it needs to be talked about because not many people or stories understand it, I feel like.
Yeah, I think a lot of them do it because of a surface level reason, which is just it's cool to have cool things in stories.
Exactly.
But as to how much you can utilize and manipulate and bend the rule to your will for the purpose of even more coolness and even more just awesomeness. Rule of cool, not JoJo's. These statements do not mesh. You are very correct in that we are not going to be abstaining from talking about JoJo's.
Right.
We are going to be talking academically.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking.
We're going to be. This is serious time.
This is serious time. Yes,
Now,
exactly.
And Caleb actually brought this up because he was the one who suggested the topic of the rule of cool, and he made this point, and it was just like mind blowing. It's one of those things that's so simple. It's like, well, of course, but then when you think about it, you're like, oh my god.
Right.
And it's that all anime is the rule of cool. That's why it exists.
Yep.
Like the idea, like if you think about it, right? Why do we
Mind
go?
blown.
Like, think about it. Why do we go to anime instead of live action? Right? Well, because we like anime, but the whole idea of liking just a medium and art style, just the fact that these things come from Japan and we're weebs, you know, like what is it that makes us like anime?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they can be so different. Anime is such a varied medium, and that variety in and of itself could be a part of it.
Totally.
But does it go deeper?
It does. It does, and we're going to explain why and
All
how.
the way deeper.
Armand the Red Slayer, thank you so much for the host.
Yes,
appreciate
thank you.
it. That's so nice of you. All right. At this rate, every single podcast will have a dandy name drop, all according to Keikatku. Oh, brilliant. Well done, Lyriot.
Yeah.
You have learned well, my young Padawan learner. A bit off topic, but ever heard of The Haunting of Hill House? Probably the best thing Netflix has ever produced. I'll rank it above anything this year, yes, including anime. Oh,
Dang.
interesting.
High praise.
Yeah. Yo, first live podcast, usually a work day, but I have strep throat. Oh, Tachi Gamer! Strep throat is the worst. I get that all the time. Like, that's my...
We've had that.
That's my Achilles heel. Like, I always get strep throat, and it's stupid.
It was kind of funny
hate
because
it.
we would always have the same room, right? So whenever one of us would get strep throat, it was just like, crap, I have like 24 hours before I just descend into awful sickness. Yeah. I know I'm late.
Dr. Women Respecter. I know I'm late, but seeing Jacob get so emotional when the march comes in like a lion reaction got me emotional, and this was episode 1. Give him a hug for me, please, Caleb. Okay. Good boy. He's
Yeah,
a good boy.
for those of you
Jacob's
that
a
have
good
seen
boy.
the show, yeah, I mean, you know why it was emotional, but there's a lot of personal stuff too that just makes that show. I didn't expect it to hit me like that, but because it's so relaxing.
Right.
But oh boy,
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to give our VIP shout out for our patron
do
supporter, Agurto, on the Discord, has joined and is one of the strong leaders of the Meat is God faction.
That's right.
Yes, Agurto, we're shouting you out. You're awesome. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate
all your
you so much,
contributions
and
the
your
Discord and everything.
wacky, ridiculous sense of humor and over the top nature. We love it, and we love you. Thank you so much, bro. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, woke up today. Ah, no, it's Monday. Then I remember, it's SOS Monday.
Exactly.
Come for the reaction, stay for the discussion. So, the the thing about the rule of cool
Yes.
is actually the rule of cool is kind of the shorthand, kind of layman's terms for willing suspension of disbelief or just suspension of disbelief.
Right. It's the idea that the cooler something is, the less you have to explain it. The less you have to, like, it can be more unrealistic because it's cool, right?
Right.
Who doesn't want to see cool stuff?
But this is something that we all do in entertainment, and this is something that a lot of people, when they're reviewing something that's for the purpose of entertainment, they'll say, I lost my suspension of disbelief. That's when something pulled them out and they realized they were watching something. They were reading something.
Yep.
You know, when a story engages you to the point where you're like, I got sucked into it. Mm-hmm. It's where the outside world and all of this faded away and it became real to you in some ways.
You were there.
Right. That's why fandoms are such a big thing, especially in anime. Oh, yeah. But this phrase, willing suspension of disbelief, is old. Like, it's not new. This whole idea of entertainment being studied from the standpoint of it pulls you into another world. It's something that actually suspends your disbelief that it's fake, you know, that it's false. So this is how it's defined officially, is that the willing suspension of disbelief is the temporary acceptance as believable of events or characters that would ordinarily be seen as incredible. This is usually to allow an audience to appreciate works of literature or drama that are exploring unusual ideas. Right, so that makes sense. And anime is basically that all the time.
And the thing is, this is also why a lot of people can't get into anime, I feel like, is because they're not used to the rule of cool, right? So they see anime and they says this is unrealistic, whereas we, as weebs and people that have adopted the anime, right? We've realized, no, that's actually one of the best things about it, is that it's unrealistic, right? Yep. And then all these other poor souls have to go with their realistic shows
and see that
just
we already know those are unrealistic, but the thing is they're trying to appear real.
Exactly.
That's the thing about,
and then there's the uncanny valley thing. Like that's why most like anime fans hate CGI so much in anime, because it's trying to be real, but we know it's not. And we're watching anime. We're not trying
reality. to get real stuff. Literally, the academic term is immersion. Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's something that, as a, getting back into D&D and stuff, the players, you want to have them have a feeling of immersion coming from the DM. So if the DM keeps jumping out of character to talk directly to the players, they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm not getting as much out of this.
That's why in, like, say, writing, for instance, one of the things that you constantly hear, and not just writing, but in storytelling, is show, don't tell, right? Because if you're telling, then you're talking to the audience, right?
Yep.
You're
breaking the fourth wall.
You're breaking the fourth wall. You're bringing up that disconnect that's there. Whereas if you show, eventually you can kind of brainwash them into thinking, this is actually happening right in front of me. I just have this little device portal that allows me to experience it because it's happening in some far off place.
Exactly. Now, this is going to blow your minds, guys, but the origin of the phrase suspension of disbelief, or willing suspension of disbelief, comes from 1817. It was coined by Samuel Taylor Coleridge with the publication of his Biographia Literaria, or his biographical sketches of literary form and opinions. And he said, and I quote, "In this idea originated the plan of the lyrical ballads, in which it was agreed that my endeavors should be directed to persons and characters supernatural, or at least romantic, yet so as to transfer from our inward nature a human interest and a semblance of truth." See? Semblance of truth? Semblance of sanity? Is it coincidence? I think not. But sufficient to procure from these shadows of imagination that willing suspension of disbelief for the moment which constitutes poetic faith. Now, that is a very long sentence. That is a very long diatribe on this whole thing of fiction, and how, when it's specifically directed towards kind of the supernatural, the unexplained, the fantastical, the over-the-top, even the romantic.
That was one of the oldest terms for it, just romantic. Yeah.
We need to transfer from our inward nature, a human interest and a semblance of truth sufficient to procure from these shadows of imagination. So what that means is we need to draw a connection with the audience and ourselves as the creators of the story, some element of truth, some modicum of human interest so that we bring them into the moment. We bring them into it, and they suspend their disbelief of, oh, this is fake and stuff. And then they have, and I love that they have it be, this constitutes poetic faith. Because what they're basically saying is, I know this is fake. Right. But it's easy for me to choose that it's real
because I kind of
want it to be. Exactly. So they don't have any evidence that it's real. There's a semblance of truth. There's a connective tissue of human interest. Right. But the actual like physical hard evidence to support it being real isn't there. Yeah. It's smoke and mirrors. It's the Wizard of Oz working behind the machine there. That's basically what all storytellers are. Is
they just do it really well.
They just do it really well.
Yeah, and like one of the things with something like the rule of cool, or even if you were to just use more pedantic terms of like romantic stories, is that you want to establish early on that it is that kind of story, right?
Yes.
Which is something that in anime they will definitely do. Like if you...
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure,
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Kill la Kill, Gurren Lagann,
Ruby.
Or Ruby, all these stories where they'll basically be like, okay, we're going to do some weird stuff in here, and it's going to be awesome, but it's going to be weird. So we're going to show that at the very beginning, so that way, if it is their cup of tea, right, for the prospective audience that they're trying to... reach, exactly. Then they will be like, okay, cool, awesome, I'm going to keep watching.
Yep.
If not, then they just won't watch. They'll be like, this isn't my thing, right?
Right.
One great example in more popular literature, like actual literature, is The Last of the Mohicans, actually. Not the movie. The movie is terrible, and it butchers the book, and it is nothing like it. But in the book, there's plenty of times where, like, they're in a chase, and you have two people that are, like, outrowing, like... 7 and it doesn't make sense, right? It just physically would not happen. Or you have someone who randomly has a bear disguise that they just in the wilderness, and they're just like, I've got a bear disguise now, or whatever, right? And it's like that stuff would not happen, right? But because it's awesome and they just sort of go with it, and because they just keep the action pumping, you're just whisked along, right? Same basic thing as what people do in anime.
Yep. And specifically with anime, the rule of cool immersion potentially breaking elements happen faster than most of us would think, because we are in the anime culture already. When you introduce someone that has never watched anime before to anime, they'll ask questions that you're like, wait, what? Why is that a problem for you?
Because you've already resolved those questions in your head, it's 5 years ago.
It's very enlightening, because you'll suddenly realize, oh, I guess that is a little bit different. Right. That is a little bit off.
You're watching Eromanga Sensei with your relatives, and they're like, this is making me uncomfortable. And you're like, really? What? Why? And then you're like, oh, yeah. But like, okay. Think about like,
So we want to go on both ends of the spectrum and show like how, okay, so an example in animation is that when you draw a human being in, this kind of 2D hand-drawn animation and stuff, is that it's in 2D. There's already a bit of immersion breaking there because it doesn't look like a person.
Yep, and it's not like a picture or something, like we're talking about like actual 2D, black outlines, everything, or however you do it.
Right.
Or just the bigger eyes. Like
that's going down into like some of the small details that really most people are okay with. But just the fact that the voices are also coming with a lip sync. So the lips might be distracting for some people as they go like, oh, that's cool and all. But like to us, we don't even think of that as being cool. That's just normal. That's just how it is. And now this is something that's a very good point that Jacob brought up, is that because this is anime, because this is animation, we are being told right from the get-go that this is how it's going to be. Right. So it's not like that, they're surprised 20 minutes in, oh, this is all animated. Like, why would I get into this and stuff?
For instance, let's say that in some live action story, right? That wasn't specifically meant to be a horror story or whatever, right?
Right.
Because in those, then, okay, that's one thing. But let's say that they end up being a ghost, right? And people are like, someone believes in ghosts, and it's like, come on, ghosts aren't real, blah, blah, blah. But then there actually turns out to be a ghost, right? Right. You have to handle it in a very specific way for the audience to actually buy into it, because it's a live action, right? Whereas in anime... You just expect it. Like
ghosts,
time loops, literally whatever you want, right? It's just, oh, okay, they're doing that, and you might be like, all right, this is going a bit out there, right? But compared to what you would accept in live action,
right. Generally, one of the things that all these stories tend to have, and this is something, again, this is getting down to the root of storytelling, is all these stories have characters. Remember how we said in the phrase that there needs to be some transfer of human interest and a semblance of truth? One of the things that is fundamental in all forms of storytelling is actually having characters. Now, in anime, specifically, one of the things that they'll do way more in live action, way more than in live action or whatever, is they'll actually have way more exaggerated personalities, way more loud voice acting, way more dramatic language. The language is specifically there to give you the idea of what these characters are so that you make the connection quickly, because if you don't, you could lose them, essentially.
Because this is anime and not live action, where someone will expect you to watch 5 45-minute episodes before you get to know a character that is semi-integral to the plot of the story. Not salty at all.
And, exactly.
And one of the things also with anime is this idea that, so you have these characters, right? And they're different in what they do and everything. And there's the whole language barrier. They're talking Japanese, and stuff. And I mean, maybe you're fluent in Japanese. I'm not, right? But that's another layer of separation. But the rule of cool does not mean the same thing for everybody, because people have different definitions of what cool is. So with anime, there's all these differences that are made to be cool with what the target audience will perceive as cool, hopefully, right? And that can be something completely different based on what your genre is, right?
Right, because anime isn't a genre. It plays within all the other genres.
Like, you can have rule of cool elements that are in a slice of life or a comedy or an action or a romance or whatever, right? And that will absolutely be different from one to the other. Like in a romance, you might have sort of funny coincidences of like the two people constantly like bumping into each other or something like that, right? And you would never believe that in real life, right? That would happen. But because these are the main characters of the story and you're here to see them and you like their interactions, then anytime that they run into each other, awesome.
Totally. Or it's even more exaggerated, where the tsundere has powers of a god in her fist, and she can punch the main character protagonist guy 25 feet across the hallway with her, with her anime power punch.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that we subconsciously accept in anime as being just, normal, or just kind of a little bit of an exaggerated bit to connect us more to the characters in the story. But we only, and I would say in anime for the most part, we generally seem to attribute rule of cool to the kind of things that are, I would say, visually rule of cool.
Sure.
Like an example
would
be
like fantasy and action type shows.
Yeah, an example would be a JoJo pose where Polnareff leans like to a 12-degree angle on the ground and is like, "You don't understand, Jotaro Joestar," and all that. Or you have characters with half-naked suits that transform into all kinds of other things, giving them powers and stuff and all beyond there. Now, those are totally rule of cool themes, but because it's within the bounds of that story, I would actually wager that there's less rule of cool in that specific instance, like with Kill la Kill and JoJo's. Those are par for the course.
Well, and that's one of the things that where was it? So Luka Perovic 088. I think the rule of cool is great for anime, but sometimes it gets in between the story, making it so unreal that it's over the top, like the power system in Dragon Ball Z. One of the things that I know I personally usually have issues with whenever I think of like battle shonen and power escalation and things like that is the idea that just because something is cool once doesn't mean it's cool for 100 episodes, right? That something can be amazing and they do it and it's awesome and they pull it off and you're there and you're just cool. This is happening, right? But if it still ends up being sort of the same thing, you end up getting this sense of familiarity, and then
you just get acclimated to it.
You get acclimated to it, and that's one of the things that I think keeps anime as a medium dynamic, is that what is cool is constantly changing.
Yep.
Because whereas in live action, it still happens, but it's much slower.
Yeah.
But in anime, because things are happening so fast, because you're going there specifically for the rule of cool, whatever it looks like in that particular story, and it gets focused on so much, it ends up changing. Because what was cool 2 years ago isn't necessarily cool today, right?
Or just specifically from person to person, like we were saying earlier. You could have someone that really enjoys the rule of cool elements in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Sure.
You could have someone who looks at the bending and goes, wow. And how is the fire, like, not affecting the firebenders? Whatever, rule of cool.
Right.
Why are not the earthbenders just killing everyone instantly? Rule of cool,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. How does fire block a rock? Like,
Rule of cool. Exactly. So you could have that, or you could have stuff like in Gurren Lagann, where we're punching holes in space-time.
Exactly.
To,
throwing galaxies.
To demonstrate the power of friendship.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
Or pigs that run into each other and end up going straight up.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
Rule of cool, right?
So yes, the simplified version is that as something becomes cooler, the need to explain it goes down. But this is an agreement you need to make with your audience within the story that you're telling, especially near the beginning.
Yes.
If you are going to say that, like, by the end of this is going to be so crazy that you won't even understand it, you get something like Ava, or where, NGE,
Well,
where essentially
that's production issues too.
No,
But,
I agree. But still, you get things like that.
Or another one, here's another one, and this is one of the cases where I would say live action, the limitations of it showed itself, was Lost.
Yeah, totally.
Because they did all kinds of rule of cool things in there, and it was fantastic.
It was amazing,
But what were people constantly wanting? An explanation.
Yep.
Right? And in anime, one of the things that, if anything, like we'll rag on anime sometimes for doing too much of this, is explaining.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Just show, don't tell. You don't need to worry about it. It's fun,
don't.
it's adventure, right? And then as long as you're internally consistent, then who cares why it's actually happening, right?
Yep.
And the way Lost ended with how many things weren't explained, and it was just sort of like, no, this is a place of wonder, where it's not understood fully. Yeah. People were like, but I
need to tie this
to that.
I need something to tie this to, a real thing that makes sense. Right. One of the things that I feel like is different in anime is that anime has, I would say, things that you look at, and from a certain perspective, you could see them as plot holes. But from another, perspective of them, we see that, like, moment in MHA where Deku cries and tears gush out of his eyes and stuff. And it's like, what is that? What is that? And you're like, no. That's an exaggeration rule of cool moment to showcase the intensity of his emotions in this moment.
It has nothing to do with generating
the plot.
enough force and pressure to drive him into the ground.
Or to generate all that water and stuff.
Exactly.
Even though the characters react to the water as if it really exists, and Mineta's all like, what is that there?
Yeah. Yeah. Or like in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, when, like, Ed gets, like, hit with a wrench, and then his soul starts to, like, float out, and then Al catches it and, like,
puts it back
into his body, like, things like that. It's like, okay, we know that that's not actually happening, but they treat it as if it is, and because it's cool and it's funny and stuff, we go with it.
Right. This is just showing the limitless aspect of anime as well. We're going to go into some of the comments here real quick. I saw someone from Star Platinum I wanted to go to. I remember one time I showed a friend the Rock Lee versus Gaara fight from Naruto. I was basically fanboying about how cool it was, but my friend didn't flinch one bit. Yeah, it's because you had the context built up to that point to showcase that Rock Lee, being not the typical ninja, made it like even more powerful of a moment for you, because Gaara is this elemental, god.
Well, and also you had your expectations properly set by the show and by just anime in general, so that you were more accepting of things that were different, right? You were able to have that rule of cool, whereas someone else, one of the things that can kill coolness so quickly is when they are not looking for coolness, they're looking for realism, right?
Yep.
So because it's not realistic, that's actually what they see as being cool, right?
Yep.
And you can totally do that, and that's why dramas exist, right? But So when you show them something like, say, Rock Lee versus Gaara, I'm just spitballing. I don't know what it was actually like, but I'm guessing this person wasn't very familiar with anime. So when they see all this stuff happening, they're just thinking, this is ridiculous, not this is awesome.
Or they just have not seen that show or that type of show, and they're just like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Sure.
There's also emotional attachments as well. Lariat's got a great point here. Would you say issues with pacing is the biggest culprit of dragging one out of being immersed with a medium? For me, it's probably the most common one, at least. Any other candidates that come to mind? Yes, pacing is a huge part of it, specifically with anime.
That's why we love Kill la Kill so much.
That is one of the reasons why we love Kill la Kill so much. It is one of the reasons also why when episode 4 came around, we were like, huh?
Right.
What is this?
But even then, they disguised it by making it so that within the episode, there was always something happening, just second to second, minute to minute. And so that it was only once it was done that we were really like, okay, yeah, that was totally a filler episode.
Yeah. JBirdie725, thank you so much for the follow. Glad to have you here. I would say pacing is a huge culprit of breaking immersion in that regard. I would say Jacob's aspect of repetition, where they utilize the same kind of thing over and over again, and the first time they did it, it actually breaks immersion just enough for it to go into rule of cool, because you're prepped for it, but every time it comes at you again and they don't evolve it, it kind of breaks
it's
some
not
immersion.
as funny anymore, which means you aren't as willing to accept the unrealisticness of it.
So an example of that would be whenever a show has those moments, like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, for instance, where Ed keeps getting frustrated at people for calling him short, but it's not an issue with that. The idea of him like changing his face and becoming like sharp tooth and all these other weird things there. It's like, okay, it doesn't add anything, so it's probably going to eventually take something away for me when they've done it for like the 20th time,
One of the other examples where this comes into play a lot is with fan service.
Ah, yes, totally.
Because, one of the shows that I absolutely love that is very much a rule of cool show and a demonstration of the kinds of unrealistic things you can do in anime is the Haruhi franchise.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Because God is a girl, and she doesn't know it. It's like all the crazy things that happen there, absolutely rule of cool. And they make sure to keep the things that happen different, but, then when there's things like, say, the fan service elements, right, in the first episode, for instance, it's sort of like, okay, this is just a wacky, weird show, right? But then when it ends up getting like put in other points later in the series, it's like, oh, this is padding, like
this is lazy.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there's a lot you can do to, I would say, kind of jolt the audience just enough to get them into the rule of cool thing, because we're kind of trying to separate this a little bit. There is a difference in our mind from just having general willing suspension of disbelief and then going into rule of cool. Like, rule of cool is the extreme good side of willing suspension of disbelief. But anime loves to just operate almost perpetually jumping the line over into rule of cool and into just fun willing suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And with anime that have a lot of fan service, it's it's kind of funny to see fan service a lot of times. But then when it's done over and over again, you're like, wait a minute, I can't just keep jumping over there. That's kind of exhausting.
And that's probably one of the big areas where anime tends to not progress as far as like adapting to the rule of cool and all that stuff, which is probably why things like Eromanga Sensei exist, because then they basically take it to an extreme where or Keijo, for instance, where no one would have thought to go there, right? So the fact that they did makes it different. And then with things like, say, Attack on Titan, where there's like no fan service, people are like, oh my god, this is amazing, right? There's no fan service because they're so exhausted from having it to be something that they pretty much constantly just put up with.
Right, and that's something that, being aware of not only the times, but specifically the culture of anime when your specific anime or story is coming out.
Yeah.
This is a great question from Ollie. Do you think that the rule of cool can make up for being lacking in other areas? Not necessarily improving these areas, but overshadowing them to make a story more enjoyable despite its flaws. Absolutely. Yeah. I think Ruby...
That's its job.
I think Ruby is a great example of that. Absolutely. There's a couple stories out there where the rule of cool is so strong in specific areas that I will totally give it it's anime, I don't really care about those types of things. And this is something that I think it's it's sometimes lost on me, even when I come to watch anime, is I have to ask myself, why do I want to watch anime today? Why do I want to watch this anime? And something about watching something like JoJo's, for instance, like we're having the younger Darby character, and he's kind of the first real falter, I think, that Part 3 has had in its rule of cool element, just kind of falling.
Although
flat.
that might just be because we didn't understand the racing game.
That might be so, but still, comparatively to all the others, it was probably one of the weakest.
Well, and it's coming off of the Falcon.
Well, right, it's coming off of Pet Shop.
Yeah.
And we're almost to Dio and stuff. So when you have a rule of cool moment there, make sure that you are still connecting to your audience in some way with this. There needs to be, like it said in the quote, some nature of human interest and a semblance of truth sufficient to procure basically the shadow of someone's imagination. So here's an example in Ruby that I think is done really well. Every time a new weapon is brought to the forefront, they show you how it works. Now the thing is, you can look at that weapon and go, that shouldn't work. Yeah. Immediately, you can look at it and go, nope, that's where it doesn't work. But because they show you not only how it works, but that it works really well, because immediately after they show you how it works, the character displays some
They're showing it
ridiculous
in action, If it was something where, say, for instance, and this is probably why pacing is so important.
Yeah.
If they had this weapon and they had a Ruby episode where they're like, okay, so I have this weapon and I designed it like this, so this does this, and they're like, basically walking someone through like the schematics of it.
Right, we would go, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't hold water. It's like, okay, it's a cool concept. It'd be a lot cooler if I could see it in action, right?
Right.
So they show it in action, and then we're way more accepting of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for whenever something you want kind of your audience to not look too deeply into, I would say push at least the story surrounding it up in regards to the rule of cool element, and then just spike it at that point where you really want them to accept something there. And that's something I think that anime understands, because all of it is rule of cool when it comes down to it.
And the idea that it's all of its rule of cool, in the sense that there's always rule of cool, but not that that's all that there is. Because the thing is that since rule of cool is such an ambiguous term, or since cool is such an ambiguous thing,
very subjective.
Very subjective.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be the only leg that you're standing on, right?
Yeah.
You use it as like a thing to sort of help you along, right? Because then it just makes the overall experience better, right?
Totally.
But you don't want it to be something where if they don't see this one thing as cool, then the entire show is just ruined for them, right?
Right.
So you have other good stuff in there too.
Right. This is what Psychronia is basically bringing up. So now I'm kind of thinking of the rule of cool as the abyss. You can change incrementally, but change the altitude too quickly, and there are problems.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you need to build your audience and basically the story up to those moments of rule of cool. An example would be in a lot of anime, this is a very classic rule of cool trick to use, and many use this to great effect, is that they'll build up this hype action moment and they'll keep the music subdued because they're focusing on the sound effects and stuff. And then all of a sudden they hit you with that opening. Yeah. The opening of the entire story.
Like Saitama versus Boros. Like when the opening comes in that fight, and it's just like,
and it's just like, all right,
here we go.
They're basically pulling you a little bit out of this visual medium that they're showing, because they're drawing a connection to what this whole story is about. They're basically saying, we've been building up everything for this moment.
So then they show you the thing that they've been conditioning you to believe is cool, but also put in a bunch of work into this compressed space and amount of time to make sure that this thing is cool, whatever cool means. It doesn't have to mean cool in the traditional sense.
Right.
And then they throw that in there, so they're like, yeah, this is the part where it gets cool. We're about to get weird, and it's going to be amazing.
And it's funny, because now that you say that, I actually realize that a lot of the times when they bring in the OP will happen a few seconds right before the really cool thing happens. So you're like, even more built up for it, because then you go, and I remember specifically at the end of JoJo's Part 2, they did this to extremely good effect with the fight between Cars and Joseph.
Yep.
And that moment when they brought in Sonochino Sadame at the end,
it
was so good. And that's the other thing. The song itself had an even more meta rule of cool thing with extending the actual song to having the final hyper long Joe.
Like the part that they knew was everyone's favorite part about the song, right?
Right.
They're like, well, this is obviously going to be everyone's favorite, so we'll take that and we'll make it bigger and better. You know? And then there you go.
That's a great point. I really think classic James Bond pioneered what most mainstream audiences are willing to accept with rule of cool. Great point.
Probably.
If we think about old school James Bond, that's a great point, Jad.
Some of the gadgets he had were so
some of the gadgets are like straight out of a comedy spy movie. Like they're ridiculous. But not only that, the whole thing of the guy being like, pew, and then turns to almost like straight to the camera and gives a one-liner and then just walks away. That one-liner,
the explosion goes off behind him or whatever.
That one-liner, if you pull yourself out of the immersion, you can almost feel the focus groups like deciding what that one-liner will be.
Which has the best effect. This one or this one.
What pop culture thing are we going to reference? What specific thing here? And you're just like, and you can just groan. But if you're in it, James Bond will be like, shaken, not stirred, or something, or whatever James Bond lines are.
We are very familiar with old James Bond movies.
Crap about James Bond, but
yeah.
Or like the villain monologuing, all the things of the villain, going and
talking as a free action, all that stuff, right?
Right. Not killing the hero when they should.
Exactly.
Rule of cool.
We would absolutely hate it if they didn't just carry the show. Like Moriarty is a great example.
Great example.
From Sherlock, right? Moriarty, just the character and all his renditions. No, Moriarty in Sherlock specifically,
Benedict
right?
Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman,
Yeah, they talk about all the different times that Moriarty could kill Sherlock. And he's like, well, yeah, I could... I mean, I'm going to kill you eventually, It's like, they just go
so
right out there and address
Sherlock.
it. Yeah, exactly. Or the, what if I just kill you? Yes, exactly. Well, then you see the look of surprise on my face. Like, all of those things where it's like, okay, would this be maybe a simpler solution? Yes. And they do that simpler solution in one of the episodes with a character that you don't care as much about, because then they can actually do it, because they don't have to worry about the cool aspects as much.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. I'm not saying, whatever. Yeah. But when it comes to Moriarty, no. You got to have this cat and mouse game, even though they could kill each other at many different points.
Yeah, totally. Morudel says, what takes me out of the anime groove is mostly the recap episodes more so than the over-exposition scenes. I understand that sometimes you need to recap due to how anime works, but to me it just feels like you're being talked down to. Also, with some friends, we were watching the Saint Seiya Spanish dub, and it's hilarious and nostalgic. I do agree with the recap bit. There is something, though, where you can remind your audience of something without it being a true recap or a flashback. An example of this is when characters speak the obvious, but they ask it in the form of a question. This is something I've seen certain stories with really good dialogue do very well, especially through the mouths of certain characters where it makes sense to them to ask these questions.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Any kind of detective thing out there ever, they are notorious for this. So for me, that gets a bit repetitive. But I've seen stories like even Bacana, one that I will applaud for its amazing dialogue and crazy characters, will recap you on specific things because of the non-linear direction of the storytelling format.
And a lot of people might say not enough because of the non-linear direction of the storytelling.
So it's all about your setting. So I'm totally with you, Marudel, in that can be really annoying. I've seen certain shows where, like MHA, for instance, they'll go through a year break and they'll have a recap episode that you can basically skip in the beginning of the season. But then even in the episode after that, they will have a smaller bit of recap that will be in the beginning. And
just in episode to episode.
Yes, what sometimes MHA does with that, though, is that recap tells you not necessarily what happened in the past, but what stuff in the past is more relevant in the here and now.
Sure.
So it tells you, I can focus my memory on these specific plot points. And it's definitely kind of talking down to you as the
Yeah,
audience.
or assuming at least that you're waiting a week to watch it, right? It doesn't
Right.
work as well when you're binging it later, but like, you know, for people where it's like, oh yeah, I've waited a week and I've probably watched a bunch of other anime in between that time.
Yeah.
This is what's going on, you know.
Yeah, and for people like Jacob and I who are watching tons of anime simultaneously, it's actually kind of helpful when a new story arc entirely begins, and then they do that. But yes, when it's like something that happened 5 minutes ago in the same episode, look up the ProZD episode on anime that's padding for filler time, and that's a great example of where what you're talking about is done horribly, like it's just done horribly wrong.
Okay, wait. Centipede Senpai. I feel like Hunter x Hunter doesn't have much rule of cool, but it's still good. What do you think? So, one, I would say that Hisoka exists.
Yes.
So,
yes, Hisoka is rule of cool.
and he's one of the fandom's just favorite characters. But the other thing is that Hunter x Hunter doesn't do the traditional rule of cool of craziness necessarily that much, because what they do instead, that is one of its claims to fame, is the internal consistencies, right? The idea of the rules of the systems and all that stuff, and the fact that it all works, right? That's one of the things that it treats as cool. It's not zany antics and insanity. It has that in there sometimes, right? But it's more of just, like, it knows what it's going for, and that's how it carves out its niche in the battle shonen genre.
An example to correlate this to is actually D&D or any kind of tabletop RPG. When you're a DM, you want to give your characters some kind of hype moment within the system that you've set up for them. Hunter x Hunter does that very well, where basically the writer acknowledges that, oh, it's been a while since Killua has had a cool moment. Let's have him just wail on Yuppie. Why? He needs to let off some steam. Translation, the author is doing a rule of cool.
Exactly.
It totally works within the system. It doesn't break immersion. But if you think about it in the story, it's something that's like, wait a minute. That might have been in there primarily. It has other reasons to be in there, but primarily for a rule of cool moment. And there's a lot of moments also like that with Meruem. I think Meruem, his entire character is a rule of cool character in many different ways. The moments where he moves after he's detected someone with N. And he's like instantly there. That is something.
Let's not go into too much detail.
I mean,
though,
yes.
Hunter x Hunter stuff, because if you haven't seen
Hunter x Hunter, you totally should.
It's quite good.
There is a lot of rule of cool in Hunter x Hunter. Like Jacob said, it's just more internally consistent.
The Abyss's rule of cruel.
Haha, nice. Gurren Lagann flashbacks, totally. There's that meme with opening theme playing during last episode. Slice of life versus shonen. One dude's crying, other dude's hype. Yep. Yes.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
Yep. And that's the thing, because cool doesn't have to mean cool. It just means something that elicits a strong emotional response from your audience, right? In Toradora, right? Whenever they play Lost My Pieces, that's, I would say, one of the equivalent times, right? And even though there's a lot of antics in there and a lot of them don't make sense, they just, you go with it because it just ends up being this roller coaster ride.
Right. One of the things I wanted to bring up in this stream is I went to TV Tropes because I love TV Tropes.
TV Tropes is amazing.
If you don't go to TV Tropes just for fun, I am sorry. You need to change that.
You can get lost in there, and it's wonderful.
It's so funny. And this will also give you a lot of insight into how certain stories are formulated. And it will break a little bit of your immersion for the beginning, but then you'll realize, oh no, they're playing with this and spinning off of these things. So the rule of cool is basically the limit of the willing suspension of disbelief for a given element is directly proportional to its awesomeness. So I'm just basically going to read it off this. So stated another way, all but the most pedantic of viewers will forgive liberties with reality as long as the result is wicked sweet or awesome. And this applies to the audience in general. There will naturally be a different threshold for each individual, also known in some circles as a rad herring, which is hilarious if you think about it as a red herring, but a rad herring, in which something doesn't make sense within the guidelines of the story's reality, but it's too cool not to include it. So this is something that doesn't fit in exactly with what we were talking about with Hunter x Hunter, but it does fit in more so with the story like Kill la Kill, because Kill la Kill will have moments where they break the fourth wall by referencing another show, like with Mako wearing, a Jotaro outfit and, or another one, Nichijou. Nichijou is perfect rule of cool.
Just, like
totally.
That entire show is basically rule of cool because, slice of life. Ordinary life. That doesn't seem like it's going to be very interesting.
Right.
No. No. They're gonna make eating lunch the most terrifyingly exciting thing you've ever seen.
This is so true. So true. What the heck? True. I'm going to continue reading this here. A rule of cool is another principle that seeks to dispel arguments among fans over implausibility in fiction. Now, this is a very good point here, guys. This is a very good point here. Whenever the fandom gets freaked out about a rule of cool moment and starts debating it, the creators of that show are groaning inside because they're like, you don't get it. This is meant to be a rule of cool moment.
And not
this is
all
meant
the time, but,
No, but seriously, Ruby specifically, there have been a lot of moments where I've seen, and, since I went and, talked to a couple of them in March and stuff, there's moments in the show where people will take something that was meant to be a simple rule of cool moment, and they'll draw all this plot relevant canonized things about it, and they'll be like, I get it, but
that's not
at all what the point is here. It says it has been cited by animation director Stephen Loader of blah blah blah, a whole bunch of other things in response to questions from fans attempting to justify temporary breaches in logical consistency. And of scientific laws that this trope circumvents, the third law of motion is probably the most frequently revoked, with the square cube law probably a close second.
Especially in anime.
Especially in anime.
What's that? Like, the idea that a bludgeoning weapon just doesn't do any damage at all, right? And you can get knocked 20 feet, shatter a wall, and be totally fine, right? You're just like, ugh, and then you keep fighting, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The second law of thermodynamics is third, and a mention has to go to the laws of relativity, which prevent us from attaining faster than light travel and going to a distant planet in just a few hours.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Note that you only get to invoke the rule of cool if the end product is in fact cool.
Right.
Note also that different opinions on what is cool create the most arguments over this. Exactly. The rule of cool is very subjective. Failure to properly use this trope can cause collision damage with walls, which is another
it's
trope.
Basically ascending the abyss.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since it's subjective, it doesn't have to be cool in the sense of Grim Reaper on a mountain playing an electric guitar. The protagonist might not use guns because it's cooler to have them fight vampires with knives and stakes. You might have missing parent syndrome because it would be weird to have parents with you on a road trip across the country.
Yep.
Basically, rule of cool works differently for whichever genre you're writing for.
Another one is when people use swords in an era when guns exist.
Yes.
There is no reason, albeit like very specific, and usually that's a knife, right?
Yeah.
Where
in very close quarters,
close quarters, right?
Buildings and stuff.
Exactly. Where a melee weapon is better than a gun.
Yeah.
And that's why I am constantly shilling sniper rifles and will until my dying breath, because they're just awesome and
because we live in the modern era and most fights are over before someone even knew there was a fight going on.
And most of the time they're not even fought by people anymore,
which is kind of depressing because that's not cool.
It's not cool. Exactly.
It's kind of dark, actually.
Yeah, dark. Yeah, and certainly not cool because having someone just pull a trigger after waiting for 12 hours, it's like, right, that's not a cool fight.
Final bit of this, there are no instances of this trope being justified, nor can there be. That is a very good point to make. If our point of basically looking at the rule of cool and saying, like, how can we justify this? The point is that that point wasn't made to be there for you necessarily. You might not find it cool, and that's okay. But you don't have to say, like, we need to find some way to justify this rule of cool moment, because that's not why they're there. Because after all, the entire point is that it's about things that don't make sense, but we still gladly accept just because they're cool.
Yes, like Joseph Joestar predicting what people are going to say. Yeah. How does that happen? Or once he says it, why do they still say it?
Yeah.
Why don't they respond to what he says? Like, he's literally basically just talking to the camera every single time that happens, even though he might not be looking at the camera.
It's amazing. It's amazing like that. There's also some subtle things like where you'll have specific times in anime, you'll realize that time isn't working right now. time is essentially frozen.
Yeah.
But because this is a visual medium and they don't like to overlay voice actors talking over other voice actors, they have to have all the talking be done in sequence, which makes it seem like it's a way longer scene than it actually is.
One of the other classic examples, and this happens in live action a bunch too, is when it's like, all right, this bomb's going to go off in 1 minute.
Funny. 20 minutes later, the bomb still hasn't gone off,
right.
you know?
But the thing is because it builds narrative tension.
Yep.
How horrible would that be if it's like the bomb's going to go off in 1 minute and then the lovers are crying and they're bearing their feelings to each other and all this and then they're leaning into get. It's been a minute, exactly a minute. It's over.
And
it's gone. Bye.
And a lot of times, more recently, there have been stories that do things like this, where they'll basically set up the rule of cool, and then they'll go harsh realism, kind of like that.
Yeah.
But because they do it like once, also maybe only like once or twice in a setting that is already harsh and realistic, and they're basically taunting you with rule of cool. It's because they set up the story to be more harsh and real.
Exactly.
An example for this is Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, there are multiple times where characters start to go into rule of cool territory. Once they do that, you know they're gonna die soon. Like they're gonna die.
Yeah.
There are a couple examples where they break that rule. I would say the Hound is an example of where the rule of cool just always works for him.
Right, and they can do that because they basically set up, this person, like, they just don't die. They just do things and that's why we have them around, right? That's why we keep them, paid very well, is because they can pretty much do whatever they want.
Yep. Jad the Mad, if you can tie your rule of cool moment into the themes of the story, then that's it. You've won storytelling.
Yep. Basically, yeah.
Yep. Some of my favorite anime or just animated stories in general have their rule of cool moments so tied integrally into the story that they end up being some of my favorites ever. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender, I cannot shut up about this show. There are so many moments early on in the story where certain characters will just by themselves utilize the bending that they've shown in such a way that maneuvers the environment to end up getting them a win or a victory or just a way to escape.
Go for it. I so badly want to talk about specific things. I'll try to keep it non-specific. If for some reason you haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender,
go fix that.
In which case, what is wrong with you? But
you should watch that before you watch any more actual anime.
Yeah, because that is just one
of the best animated things
shows
ever.
Yeah, ever. It is absolutely incredible. But when Zuko confronts a certain person, right?
Yep.
And a certain thing happens, right?
Yep.
And the thing is that actually happens multiple times in the show. The time when it happens in Zuko alone, for instance, narratively it doesn't really even mean much. It means a lot in that episode, but it doesn't mean much for the grander story. But I still was fire on swords. I was obsessed with that for so long after I watched that episode because I was just that is literally the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
And then you have Toph as a character who just is the rule of cool.
Exactly.
And even in the ways where they think we could just have this be rule of cool, but we're actually going to kind of explain it just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Why she's so strong, though?
Well, no, that actually, okay.
No, I know.
But the idea is that if she's constantly practicing with earthbending, and she learned from a very young age from things that naturally use it all the time, and that's basically her entire existence because she's trapped in a place where she's none of the stuff at her home is going to be occupying her headspace. But basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But see, this is how you know, this is something where, because the story is
but
something that we appreciate so much, the rule of cool moments become this thing that just excites the passion, not only of the individual moments, but of the story overall. So why is rule of cool important? Because when you have a long story, and I actually think this is very important to talk about, with anime specifically, because anime has a lot of stories out there that are way longer than any sane human being should be able to kind of follow. Like One Piece, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
It's insanely long. The thing is, though, is that there are a lot of fans of that show. And I'll bet you money, there are about 25 huge rule of cool moments probably throughout that show. But the thing is that I'll bet you also that no one has a perfect memory of the stuff between those moments.
Okay.
No one could quote One Piece from start to finish.
You say that now.
I know.
But
I know.
Yeah.
But I know people that can quote like Lord of the Rings from start to finish.
Yeah.
I could almost do that. But like specifically with that, with anime, there are these moments where you realize that because there are, moments 1 through 25 peppered throughout this, you go through this like this moment of like, all right, we're going into a little bit of a valley as we build up towards the next hype moment. And I think a lot of anime or manga story writers and all that, they understand this, and they're like, especially with action stories because they're simpler,
Sure. Yeah.
It's easy to be like, okay, let's go from hype moment to hype moment to hype moment with little valley dips and build-ups in between. And that's smart because they're basically saying, we're going to go for this as long as possible, as long as we can keep printing it and making money. But we also want people to have fond memories of this story. We want people to look back on it and go, this story is amazing. Why? They'll cite one of those 25 moments. But the thing is that that does not a story make, basically. Like that is not the whole story. Those are the peaks. Those are the high points.
Sure. I feel like rule of cool as just an idea, as a concept, is really kind of more about audience trust.
Sure.
And that basically you're building up audience trust and audience goodwill with things that you do, to the point where they'll let you get away with things because come on, let's get to the good stuff, right? And because with rule of cool, it doesn't necessarily mean rule of cool. It's more rule of awesome, with whatever awesome means in that moment, right? For a romance, seeing the pair that you ship get together is a rule of cool moment.
I see it also as an element of risk. Where you say trust, that means there has to be some element of risk involved.
Yes, absolutely.
Meaning that they're basically risking breaking the audience's immersion for the sake of rule of awesome. Because they have the audience trust, they're comfortable with taking X amount of risk.
And that's why, like, in a lot of stories where, say, like fantasy or things like that, where you have to like build up your own world, or like in Hunter x Hunter, a power system or whatever, you do it slowly because you don't want to just dump it all on them at the beginning, because then they won't be able to realize and recognize the rule of cool that's there. Kind of like what the person said with the Rock Lee versus Gaara fight, and the friend that wasn't familiar with it, and they were just like, oh, okay, right? They didn't know about all that stuff. They hadn't been brought into the fold, so they just saw that all this stuff that didn't really make sense to them, probably, I'm guessing, right? Whereas if you then sort of like little by little trickle it in, weave it into all the other stuff, you build that audience trust up, that audience loyalty, essentially.
Yeah.
Then you can have these moments where you capitalize on that. And if the person were to go into that with no context, right, and they didn't know what kind of story it was, they didn't know what to expect or whatever, and they just went into it with no context, they would be absolutely lost, right? But because you've groomed that, then you can have these incredible things happen, and it's okay. Right? And that's why a lot of stories will do that at the very beginning, because then it also, with like something simple, because it sets the tone, right, of where they're headed. And then it's like, buckle up for the ride. But, yeah.
So, rule of cool, it's something that basically tugs at our willing suspension of disbelief and then ends up giving us these like really good just gold nuggets of anime just gasm goodness, and all that. A lot of times it ends up helping us excuse issues in anime because anime. And then other times it basically it stokes that fire of childlike wonder and excitement as we realize, oh right, I didn't come to anime for realistic.
Exactly.
I didn't come to anime to be grounded in reality. I didn't come to anime to experience the truth of this world. Like you can totally get that if you want. But that's something I think that's beautiful about anime, is that for the most part, you're coming here because there's going to be some world of characters and whatever that will immerse you and take you to places that will surprise you. And I think that's why anime is finally like becoming so mainstream right now, is people are realizing how limitless the medium is and how limited so many other mediums are.
Right, because it can take you, because if you remember when you were a kid, right? When you were a little kid and anything was possible, right?
Yep.
That was pretty cool. And a lot of us would want to go back to that if we could somehow, and not, starve from shirking our responsibilities or whatever, right? All that other stuff, all those demands of life. But because life can get tough, right? Having something where we can completely cast aside realism, and that's why I think so many anime end up being some sort of fantasy or with fantastical elements or whatever, is because the whole idea is that it is unrealistic. A lot of people so there in the epic rap battle for George R.R. Martin versus J.R.R. Tolkien, one of my favorite lines, and this is not something where I rag on Game of Thrones for this, because that's what makes Game of Thrones, one of the things that makes Game of Thrones so good. Yeah. But it's when
Tolkien,
when Martin basically says, your stories are so predictable, I know what's going to happen by page and age 5, right? And Tolkien's basically like, well, yes, it's true that a lot of times characters, in life are people to die randomly. But newsflash, the genre is called fantasy. It's supposed to be unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I feel like we shouldn't lose that excitement over the unrealistic aspects of fantasy and of not just fantasy, but of just fiction being something that takes us out of our world. There's so much value in the kind of just simple, just entertainment of within anime. There's so much value there. But a lot of people will go to entertainment specifically as an escape mechanism. And I know that in some ways that's kind of unhealthy. Like, it's something that, you could look at that and go, well, in excess, that's something you probably shouldn't do.
Exactly.
But one of the things that's very, very important, I think, that everyone have at least access to is some kind of escape.
Right.
And anime is beautiful for that, for just the people today. With all the specific kinds of entertainment we have out there, anime just fits into this nice, perfect niche where you can go to it and realize that even within the things you've accepted within anime, the things that you have, a very wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey suspension of disbelief. It stretches like Hisoka's bungee gum, and it can contain so much. You can... there's so much that can... You slap this bad boy, so much immersion-breaking stuff can fit into this. That there can still be rule of cool moments that... can surprise you. And I think that's why we all like anime. At the very least, we all like the hype moments in anime. It's why I think also just reaction channels exist. I think it's in a lot of ways why people, get that kind of vicarious enjoyment off of seeing someone else enjoy that rule of cool moment. Like when we watched MHA Season 2, Episode 10 for the first time, and people were freaking out in the comments being like, I can't wait for you guys to get to MHA 210. And we're like, okay, well, like, we don't know what's happening then. But, all right.
Yeah.
And then when that happened, it was a moment that was absolutely rule of cool. It was totally built up to. It was something that specifically within the moment you could look at, the amount of damage that was done and be like, well, they're paced, they're done, they're dead.
Why isn't the audience dead?
Why aren't half of the people in the stands just concussed at least,
Like, we saw the debris from the concrete. It's like, why did you do that, Cementos? You made it worse.
Yeah, exactly. but then you get this moment of not only excitement, but I would say like vicarious enjoyment of the emotions that the characters within the story are feeling. So you put yourself into Deku's shoes, you put yourself into Todoroki's shoes, you put yourself in the audience shoes, and to allow yourself not only to then absorb that, experience it, and be entertained by it, but to then express that out. I think there's a lot of cool positive things that happen there. So that's all we're kind of saying there. There's we kind of would like to hear from you guys. What are your favorite like rule of cool moments or favorite things about the rule of cool, or maybe just some questions that you have in general about the rule of cool? And we'll get into the comments there and chat with you guys.
There was one from Malku.
Yeah, he was asking about the inverse thing. Hold on.
Yeah.
So would you say that there's an inverse of the rule of cool, a rule of drama, like something not so grounded happens, but it works because it's dramatic and intense? That's still the rule of cool, though.
Yeah, and it still is. And the thing is that because you're going, you have to treat it slightly differently, though, because since what you're going after is a serious emotion,
right,
you kind of have to do it in a serious way.
Yeah.
Because that when it's done badly, that's how melodrama comes around, right?
Right.
But if, say, it's the whole thing of the person running into their crush somewhere, when they really don't, want them to be there or whatever, right? Or
it's when like Gollum and Sam and Frodo are going up Mount Doom, or Frodo and Sam are going up Mount Doom, and then like Gollum jumps on the back and stuff, and then it becomes this just brawl of them going at it and stuff.
And they make it work because it's like, okay, Gollum goes there because that's where he knows they're going, right?
But like, how did he show up there? Just at
exactly.
The right time,
How did he? Yeah, all that stuff, or the fact that. Well, okay, maybe this is more rule of cool.
Sam sliced his stomach. How is he still going after that,
exactly. Or the fact that they're doing the battle at the Black Gate, right?
Right.
And battles don't last that long, So it's like we are literally maybe buying like a few minutes, or like an hour, right?
or less.
Or less for them to cross the rest of a small continent,
Right.
Totally. But, it works because, rule of cool.
Yeah, Lunar's right. The rule of cool can also come from character building moments, like
Absolutely.
we said with MHA. Yep. Lariat Man, and jokes aside, Dandy's basically just what rule of cool are we doing today in this episode? Nice.
That can totally work, right?
Haven't you heard? I'm Sakamoto definitely embodies this trope as well. Okay,
that is what
cool.
That is what we have heard. Yeah.
Like when Gon freaks out on Pito. Yep.
That is
nice. Gon freaks out. Nice. Good pun.
But that's
going.
Absolutely rule of cool that also tied into characters.
I've seen a trend alongside Game of Thrones and a lot of media of subverting the rule of cool and having the media remind you that they're trying to be realistic. This subversion of the rule of cool has become sort of a counter movement. I hope the fun, unrealistic fantasies win over the cynicism in the end, though I'm already tired of it.
Yep.
Yeah, Mesker, I think this is something where, one, fantasy is expensive to make.
Yes.
So right now, what they're going
Realism's
for now...
cheap.
Right. So what they're doing now, and this is something that might break your immersion a little bit for some of these stories, but they're doing this post-apocalyptic thing. This is not new, by the way.
Sure.
Where you actually get to make the sets cheaper because you just have broken stuff everywhere.
Yep.
You don't have to dress it all up.
Well, and it's stuff that exists in our world. It's broken stuff from our world.
Right.
And a lot of the ones that are like gritty, realistic, fantasy type stuff, what they really are is thinly veiled soap operas / dramas.
Yep.
Soap operas has a bad connotation to it, but the idea is that
they're just colored with a fantasy tint. Basically.
Exactly, and you can totally do that. I mean, anime does that.
Anime does that all the time. What do you think all the isekais are? Like,
yeah, it's basically just like, hey, we'll just take this skin and throw it on there, and then do something else with it, right?
Yeah.
You can do that.
There are obviously good examples.
Yeah. But it can get old after a while because they keep doing the thing that was that they imitate something else that did it really well, right?
Right.
But they keep doing that, and then it's not fresh anymore. What it makes me think of is in Chronicles of Narnia. It starts out in the dedication that C.S. Lewis gives. He gives the dedications and whatever, but then he talks about like and to my nieces and nephews and children or whatever. I give this to you in hope that one day you will be young enough for fairy tales.
Yeah, that's good. My favorite rule of cool line, Wagana wa hoin kyoma. Nice one, Star Platinum, yes.
Son of a bitch.
I am mad scientist. It's so cool. Son of a bitch. Yeah. I can't talk about my favorite rule of cool moments since you guys haven't read One Piece yet. No worries, Cychronia. Rule of Cool is my favorite thing for anime. Just to be a bit different, I've got to say each finishing move in G Gundam, a more battle shonen take on the Gundam formula.
Oh, okay.
Very cool. The Monogatari series also has a bunch of grounded personal Rule of Cool moments.
Sweet.
Nice. Rule of Cool is reckless. Punish the reckless. I don't get the reference, but I like it.
Are edgelords a category of Rule of Cool? They absolutely are.
Absolutely.
And here's the thing. That is a great example because the term edgelord comes from when the Rule of Cool is being used, but there are a lot of people that don't find it cool. Like, for instance, Eren in Attack on Titan. When I first saw Attack on Titan, Eren was one of the most compelling main characters that I'd ever seen, and there were a bunch of things that they did to do that was not just like edge, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, looking back on it, there's a lot of edge with Eren in Attack on Titan, especially in the anime.
Yes.
Right? Like the whole bit at the end of season 1, when the debris falls and he's like impaled by the thing and all that stuff, that actually wasn't in the manga.
Oh, really?
No.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. Like, when they're underneath the tunnel, he transforms there. Like, but, you know, so that was a dose of edge that was thrown in there, right?
Gotcha.
Attack on Titan made it work better than most because of the setting that they had done and all that stuff, and
it's a
audience
pretty
trust
cool
that they had
moment.
built up. It's
a really cool rule show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, right? But, you know, and... yeah. Mm-hmm. But then there's a lot of moments where, like, say it can be made fun of, even, like with
totally.
Aang in the the shop where he just appears and he's got the crazy, like, demon armor and stuff, and Sokka's just like, what is that?
And that's a pretty meta poking fun at not only the all the edgy protagonists out there that aren't just fun and wholesome and stuff, but also the desire to dress them up into some kind of, like, really weird, just dark kind of version. And also the reason for that scene, specifically that scene, was because the studio wanted Aang to be made into an action figure, but they said, we need to give him weapons and or something that the kids can accessorize him with. And the creators of the show said, hell no. But they were under compulsion, contractually, agreed to make that happen. So they had to put that in the show.
So
and
they basically there could be a miniature model thing of that with all the
and they basically stuck the middle fingers up to them by saying, we won't do it. And they, Nickelodeon never made a miniature of that, Because it looks stupid.
It looks stupid, yeah.
Oh, this is good, yeah. Probably the biggest danger with Rule of Cool is pandering. Fairy Tail is awful for this. Time and time again, badass characters would be introduced in genuinely compelling ways, then they would be schooled by a yelling Urza or Natsu, and afterwards inexplicably turn good. And in a poorly thought out speech about friendship, and you've exposed that you only care about your story's aesthetic appeal. That sounds very much that you've definitely felt this experience, this pain a lot. Sounds like me talking about Bleach, but
this is not an objective comment right here, but what you've said, I totally understand.
I totally understand why you're saying that. Yes.
And the thing is that that could absolutely be the perfect Rule of Cool for someone else. I remember when I watched Bleach, right? Mm-hmm. The Ichigo just going all the Terminator and power of resolve solves everything. I loved it, and that was absolutely what I needed at that time in life, because it was the idea of someone who believed so much in what they were doing that they were able to overcome anything, right?
Totally.
But, when I got older, it's like, okay, it's not quite as awesome.
Yes. Mesker says a good example of Rule of Cool is literally any moment with Joseph in part 2.
It really is.
Like, Joseph is literally, the epitome of the Rule of Cool, to the point where I can show anyone who hasn't even seen anime scenes of Joseph
crawling
independently of context, and they're just like, what is this goober? And they just start smiling because it's just like, this guy's an idiot. I love him. I think Jack Sparrow is an example of that type of Rule of Cool character, like Joseph Joestar.
Yeah.
There's other characters like that where they're just making things up as they go along, but things always just tend to work out for them. Mm-hmm. And you can look at that and go, that's plot armor. And you're like, well, yes, because Rule of Cool.
Right. It's the idea of not just what is being done, but why it's being done. And that can get very iffy because, creator intentions and all that stuff, and it's art. So, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder and everything, but...
this is a good point, Mesker. Isn't things like, it's so cool instead of a bitch, more Rule of Funny instead of Rule of Cool, like suspension of disbelief for the sake of a joke, not for the sake of coolness? Well, the thing is, cool is such a vague term.
Yeah.
It basically just makes you...
anything that you want to have happen, where it excites you that it happens.
Anything that excites you beyond just being like, that's great. Like, if it makes you laugh, if it makes you scream, if it makes you squeal, if it makes you feel good things inside with any kind of thing, that's essentially what we mean by Rule of Cool. And honestly, the other reason for it is also the things that should break your suspension disbelief. Don't think about the result of how it necessarily makes you feel as much, but also that Hoen Kyoma doesn't ever speak like that ever again or ever before that in the story. Right. And we haven't seen characterization that would build up to this other than he likes to do the that kind of thing.
We know that he's a weird fellow and does weird things.
So because of that, we trust it, but it still breaks a little bit of immersion just enough. Yeah. And it is for the sake of a joke, but jokes can be cool just in much as that something that's funny can be cool, or something that's cool can be funny.
It's the same thing as with fan service. I really feel like fan service is the most obvious example of something that's not necessarily cool, like in the traditional sense of cool, right? Yeah. But it's something where it's trying to elicit some response from people, and even though it doesn't make sense for it to be in there, right? Because they believe that there will be people that will enjoy it and be glad that it's there.
Right.
They'll do it even though it doesn't make sense.
Yep. Accessorize Aang. What about his staff? I know, Malkuth. I know.
Staff is a staff. Staff is a glider.
Oh my gosh. Lunar. Speaking of edgelords, I think that a lot of the backlash against this trope comes from dragging a character down to near their lowest point and never offering contrast. I've recently grown a liking to edgelord characters that learn to love again and fight for those that they love.
That can be great, yeah.
There is basically a backlash against the static edgelords, and also the edgelords with no context. Right. Where the context is there for the sake of just kind of excusing the edgelord behavior.
I feel like with edgelords, it's the idea that, in the same way with the rule of cool, the edge has to be proportional to the amount that it's earned.
Right. Guts is a great example of an edgelord that is earned.
Because he goes through some...
Guts.
Yeah, like the fact that he ends up turning into what would traditionally be a very edgy character, with this big sword and all that stuff, and smashing things and everything and brooding. And
totally.
It works.
Picture Crollo, same voice actor as Okabe, saying, "It's a cool son of a bitch." Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. How long since the stream started?
Started at 3
hour and 17 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Delivering anime for Rule of Cool is most of the times for side characters bad, because usually the ones who are used for it are the ones who lack personality, or in common cases only have one thing going for them.
Sure.
Yes, and we don't call those characters. And a lot of people can get on our case, Jacob and I specifically, about them, because Jacob and I don't consider a one-dimensional speaking box to be a character.
Right, and it's like...
They have to have a why.
Exactly. Technically they are, and all characters start there because you go into a story knowing nothing, right?
Yep.
But they shouldn't stay there, and if they do, then sure, have them have their rule of cool moment, and then have them leave, right?
And be done.
They should, because the thing is that when they don't leave... then it feels like they're taking away from potential rule of cool moments for characters that we do care about.
Yep.
And then you can feel like you're getting robbed.
Yep. Yeah. This is something that a lot of ensemble casts have a problem with, is that they'll end up creating so many characters because it's so fun.
Yep.
Like MHA, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
8 of the 20 characters in Class 1A are not characters. Just
easily. And that's not like a counted thing. It could be more.
Yeah, and it's not something against MHA.
Yeah.
That's just impossible to have 20 well fleshed out characters in this short of a time.
And that's why, for instance, like in MHA, you might have seen that a lot of the times when they introduce new characters, I get kind of frustrated, right? Because there's all these characters that I want to see more stuff from. I want to give them more screen time and turn them into actual characters rather than just the starting point, right?
Right.
And it's like, no. Like, yeah, you can have cool characters and we can bring them in later, but we still have all this other untapped potential.
Right. One of the things that this has led to is, especially in big anime, shonen, long-running stories with big casts and stuff, is this acceptance of essentially, I just call the tertiary character, where you have the main characters, and the main characters are usually 5 or less. Right. They're extremely well thought out, three-dimensional, multiple aspects to them characters. And if you have 5 of those characters, oh my god, you're killing it.
Yeah.
But then they're like, but we want lots of characters. Like, okay, So then they have these side characters. Now what side characters have is they have a motivation, and they have like two things going for them.
You understand their personality and such and all that, so that when they're on screen, you're able to enjoy them, right?
Right. But even then, the characters of these side characters are actually less consistent than the tertiary characters because they don't get enough characterization to explain why their personality is necessarily the way it is. And we're supposed to get it from either visual storytelling or from subtle cues that aren't really explicitly stated. But the tertiary characters have one thing going for them. Right. They have one shtick. That's it. That's all they do. They get very little screen time. But what's really funny in anime like this, that one tertiary character can sometimes become the fan favorite character because not only are they consistent, they are so perfectly in alignment with what they were introduced as from the beginning that people will just... be like, I can imagine so much more to this character if we actually gave them screen time.
Right, and it's the idea, because with characters that are around for a long time, there's more opportunity for things to go badly, right? Where you have screen time with them, and it's not everything it chalked up to be, right? But if you have that one good moment, and then that's it, right? Like Neo, for instance, from Ruby is a great example of a tertiary character that became a huge fan favorite, right? She was a side character attached to a 2-bit villain. Nothing against Roman Torchwick. He is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, Roman Torchwick is one of the best characterized.
Excellent character. Plot relevance, not so much.
Yeah.
But the fact that she was just in there, she had, 1-2 fights, and that was it.
Yep.
And fandom absolutely loved her.
Yep.
And myself included, right? Chibi certainly helped out with that.
Chibi,
but
100% helped out.
And Chibi was where they actually took that tertiary character and they're like, okay, let's turn them into a full-fledged sort of character in this comedy sketch thing.
Right.
Yeah.
They upgraded them to side character status and gave them little bits of motivation, little bits of humanity and emotion, and multiple maybe dynamics to the characters.
Oh yeah, Shinso. Yep, great example.
Shinso is a great example of this in MHA.
Absolutely a tertiary character that could have absolutely been a side character. The way he was treated in his episode was as that of a side character.
And that's how you should introduce characters if you're willing to give that much time to them. If you aren't willing to give that much time to them, that's okay. You can't spend that much time with every single character. One of the examples...
You have limited screen time. You have limited time.
Yeah, one of the examples recently in MHA was the whole Battle Royale bit there. There were some characters that they introduced that were close to getting upgraded to side characters. They were pretty close.
Yeah.
And I would say that some of them were like, oh, you're an agreeable character.
I wouldn't mind if you were a side character.
I wouldn't mind if you're a side character. But we could tell that based around the type of way that they were introduced, that it's like, they have their shtick. Or they have their two things, But we're not going to give them the actual why behind their character. We actually, I think, only got one of those, and that was the Master Airbender from Shiketsu High.
Oh, yeah.
I keep wanting to say Butters from the Discord because he embodies the character so much, but it's actually not his name. Help me out,
that's
chat.
Just the strongest association we have with him now.
That's great.
Yeah. Do you think the Warfing trope is an example of rule of cool going badly? Yes.
Yeah, that is a very sad example.
That's right.
Inasa, thank you.
Yeah.
Inasa was a great example of a character introduced like Shinso that had a great contradiction to his character, a couple shticks, a cool designed power, and all this stuff. But once the story started to move on, we realized,
and
okay, that's okay.
And the thing that makes me hold Shinso on a higher level than Inasa, even though Inasa got more screen time, it's actually kind of because of the screen time. Because here's the thing, I don't like all of Inasa's moments. He has awesome moments, but I don't like all of them, and and certainly not on the same level as like the highest moments, right?
Right.
Whereas with Shinso, it's very relegated. He's mysterious, mysterious characters can be fantastic because you're building them up without having them have focus, right? It's just like, you sort of ask a question about them and then they're gone. That can be great for
that was literally how he showed up and talked down to Bakugo.
Yep.
And then was gone.
Yeah, and then the rest of it was basically just
us waiting for him to show up.
Yeah, and like background images and like frames and stuff that they gave him, and seeing him doing stuff, but not really giving him focus, right?
Yeah.
And then when they finally did focus on him, they hit hard, right? And then it was done, and it made us want more, but they didn't give us more. which sucked, but in a lot of ways that sort of immortalized him as this great experience.
Yep, great point.
But yeah, the Warfing trope.
Yeah.
Because if you want to have a badass character, that's awesome. Have a badass character. But, like, if your badass character is constantly getting beaten, then are they really that badass?
Yeah.
You know?
YX Casual says, I think charisma is really important when it comes to the rule of cool. I love Joseph from JoJo due to this. As for the major battle shonen, charisma is the main reason Luffy is my favorite, even though he is not the most developed.
Oh,
that's very cool. I do think charisma has a related, semi-directly proportional measuring kind of element to rule of cool when it comes to characters, because charisma is something that pushes characters to be, like we said, more over the top, more bombastic, more expressive,
Sure.
and I would say also more efficient with their one-note shtick. Here's an example
Sure.
with specific characters out there like Kamina. Kamina, when he's first introduced, is very much a one-note shtick character. There is a moment later on in the story where he talks quietly with someone, and I don't want to talk about what it's about, but it's one of the greatest moments in the anime because suddenly his entire character gets this added dimension, and it's just, it's so good. But that's something where up until that point, you could have written off Kamina as being a side character. Not a side character, because he has a couple things going for him.
He's one of the main characters, but
he is not the main character.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
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 I mean, no, but really, he's not the main character.
Right. But, anyways, going off of that, charisma with, like, Joseph and all that stuff.
Yeah.
If you think about charisma and what it is, people with high charisma, like, in real life, like, in school, when we were kids, we might have called them cool, right? Well, rule of charisma for characters and for people, really, what it is it comes across as they know who they are.
Sure.
They're
confident
in who they are, right?
Yeah.
And you can't be confident in who you are if you don't know who you are, which basically gives this connotation that they are a fully fleshed out character. Even if you haven't gotten to see it yet.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly powerful.
That is a very interesting thing about Ryder from Fate Zero. He is not, in my opinion, a fully fleshed out character even by the end of the story.
Sure, he doesn't have that much, like growth, for instance, he doesn't really have that much.
No. And he's got maybe 2 dimensions, I would say solidly. Like two pretty good dimensions to him.
Yeah.
But the thing is that his confidence just oozes out of his character in such powerful ways that it's just like,
You can't help getting swept along by the guy.
Absolutely, yeah. How would you want a bland background character from MHA to be reworked going forward to become more fleshed out?
Spend time with them.
Yeah, I think you just need to spend time with their character and actually showcase them taking agency in their decisions in ways that reflect their internal world and blah, 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 blah. There you go.
Yeah, one of the things that I feel like I don't really know how manga works in the production of it and everything like that. The difference between like serialized fiction versus like just a one story that is compact and tells its story and it's done. Like anime originals or my book, for instance, is that with characters, a lot of the times you have to get to know the characters. The first draft for Battle Lines was, almost nothing like what it is now, for one, but the thing that was so good about that experience of writing it is that I got to know the characters, right? And then I could just write scenes with them and it wasn't a big deal, right? I knew who these people were, so when they interacted, it just happened naturally. I didn't have to painstakingly think of what is this person going to say and all that, right? And with something like, say, longer serialized fiction, especially something like MHA, where it's like, weekly, right? Stuff, you got to come out with things. Then I would imagine it would be way harder because you don't get to experiment with characters and keep going with them in that sense. I can imagine it would be a lot easier to basically come up with a new design, come up with a new character, give them that bit, that little bit, and then then you're done, and then you keep going, right? And then maybe you then alternate back to your core characters where you've actually been able to spend time with them and get to know them.
Right.
But with, like, say, a lot of the other students in 1A, they don't really get the light of day because, well, writers got a schedule to keep to, right?
Right. I think also one of the things that's really, really unfortunate with we've now shifted discussion more towards kind of characters and how characterization needs to be consistent. But this is tied into the rule of cool in that one of the things that is dangerous about the rule of cool is that you can sacrifice someone's characterization on the altar of rule of cool. Yes. Basically saying, okay, I'm going to have a rule of cool moment, but I'm going to also have this character do something that's so contradictory to who they are or to what they've been built up to for the purpose of a rule of cool moment or for a dramatic moment, a funny moment, a romantic moment, whatever. And that's something that, again, goes back to the whole trust thing. You need to have that trust built up with your audience in order to, get through these types of things. So I would say I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. There was a question that kind of spurred this whole thing here. I think it was Luca Perovic saying, do you view rule of cool from like how everyone sees it or from your own subjective viewpoint? What I mean to say is that can rule of cool be seen from two viewpoints? Yeah, I think that's kind of it, is that it can absolutely be seen from two viewpoints. And what that is that just acknowledge that other people will not see this rule of cool moment the same way you do.
Yep.
So specifically if you're going to have anything be consistent in your rule of cool moment, make sure it fits within the characterization of the characters you've done so far. Or if you're going to add to the characterization of some character, like someone in MHA that's a little bit bland right now, make sure that you then, from then on going forward, consistently have that bit of characterization be contained within the character.
Right. Cychronia, I'd watch an entire episode of Invisible Girl going on a stealth mission. I absolutely would too, and I would love it.
Yeah, because she has charisma.
She has charisma, and the thing is that that's another example of one of those tertiary characters that the fandom ends up loving way more than they have screen time for. But
way more than she deserves, in my opinion. But
debatable.
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea of getting that additional screen time with this person, where what we've seen so far from them.
Scene.
Yeah.
You're so funny.
I didn't mean to do it.
I could tell, but it was just you're like realizing midway through the joke that it's just this is funny.
Yeah. But because of that, then the idea of, say, and this is only for if someone did like Invisible Girl. Like, for instance, the idea of an entire episode that's just an Invisible Girl stealth mission, that might not be your cup of tea, right?
They would need to really sell me on
exactly,
it. Exactly,
But for someone like me, I'd be like, yes, absolutely, because that's more of that rule of cool. Does it make sense from within the story, from, like, just time for characters and things like that? Not really, but I would absolutely love it.
Like, I would like a Mako centric episode that's like we got earlier in Kill la Kill, like another episode like that. I will gladly take something like that.
That would be absolutely amazing.
MMA Bedel Salam, thank you so much for the follow. Glad to have you here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You could also look at law of charisma as law of attraction. You are drawn to attractive or charismatic. Oh, sorry, drawn to charismatic.
You are drawn
people.
to attractive people.
So you did too.
And a lot of times people draw attractive people.
That is true.
But, yeah.
It reminds me of when Akira Toriyama wanted to progress the story of Dragon Ball, but the studio was against it. So he threatened to end Dragon Ball if he couldn't skip ahead to when Son Goku was an adult. Studios and the creators clash.
Dang.
Nice. Wow. And that's why we got Dragon Ball Z. Because, I mean, Dragon Ball, the original, so incredibly popular. Like,
so the funny thing, so when I was first told that I should watch some of Dragon Ball Z, I didn't know that there was a difference between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. So I started watching Dragon Ball, and I was like, okay, it's kind of funny. All right, cool. But wow, this must be a really long show, because they like, okay, like, this is all right. They're gonna go on like a coming of age story for this guy as he just grows up and everything. No, it was a completely different show, and then I found that out. It's like, oh, okay, but yeah.
Whoa, I forgot you guys had a stream. Is this live? Yes, Zigzag. Thank you so much for joining. It is live, and this is our Twitch channel. Be sure to follow us here so you can stay up to date on all of our live streams.
And tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. for the Berserk manga reading.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah. Another Haikyuu discussion. Oh, would you have a Haikyuu discussion?
Haikyuu, okay.
Haikyuu has a rule of cool.
Haikyuu absolutely does have rule of cool. The thing, and this might be one of the ways that it sort of separates itself from a lot of other sports anime. I don't know because I haven't seen many sports anime, but it keeps things very much grounded in realism while still having the hype moments, right?
Yeah.
So we'll still get absolutely thrilled when Nishinoya does his foot block or whatever, or any of the crazy things that happen.
Totally.
Right? But those things have more weight to us for this show because it set this show up as being realistic. So if that were to happen in like a more just generally hype rule of cool type show where just, throw logic out the window and this is just awesome, right? A foot block wouldn't be as cool.
Right. I think that the thing about Haikyuu also is that because it was our first sports anime, we haven't built up trust with anime and sports anime with regards to the sports genre.
Sure.
So we don't know necessarily what is kind of generally acceptable or to be expected in sports anime. So it was kind of nice having us start on one that was more grounded than not. Yes, Karapika definitely has a lot of rule of cool moments. Rule of cool for Karapika is basically the arc of York New.
Yeah,
that whole thing was like, we have the Phantom Troop, we have the whole things of Nen with Gon and Killua, but then Karapika just causing this other rule of cool group, the Phantom Troop, to freak out because they're like,
you have
we're
a
getting
rule of cool
targeted
character go up against a rule of cool
squad,
and that's okay. This is actually a great example of where the Worf effect didn't happen.
Yes,
right? Because if you think about it, they built up the Phantom Troop like crazy, right? And it was also that when Karapika does all this rule of cool moments against the Phantom Troop, it actually is hype and cool and insane and unbelievable and oh my god, right?
Yeah, so cool.
But they still kept the Phantom Troop cool while doing it, which kept Karapika beating them cool.
Yes.
And they
it was just this give and take.
Somehow did it, right?
An example of this was when Krollo is telling the Phantom Troop to just go wild. I loved it when Krollo went up in there and he did his indoor fish thing.
His requiem for...
Well, before that, he did indoor fish. Do you remember that ability?
Yes,
he melted a guy. He dismembered him into pieces. And it was just like, there was no build up to indoor fish. There was no build up to this character that he was going to fight. It was just him one-shotting him. Just boof, you're done. You're done. I'm the leader of the Phantom Troop. Who do you think you are?
Yeah, and they don't. And then the best part is that they don't actually even show the fight. They just show the aftermath.
Yeah. And then he goes up and does his Requiem for Uvogin, and it's just with him cry. I think he was crying.
I think so.
I think he was crying. Yeah.
So.
And then he's just like, it's so much a rule of cool thing that I would say it's not about whether or not it was explained. It's about something that stretches our suspension of disbelief, our immersion into this. I would say not only the plot, the actual things going on, but also the themes. The idea that these characters, who are these ruthless killers, also care deeply about each other. That's something that's an emotional rule of cool. It's something that's saying, wow, they're really a family. This is an example of what they do for their family. So I think that's a great example of that. And then, of course, Karapika, like you said, going toe-to-toe with them, just barely.
Like the fact that there were so many moments where we're terrified Karapika of like, you are in dangerous waters right now, my friend.
Right. The piranhas are right around the corner. You better not step your toe. Oh, no, don't do it.
But then Karapika is just like, okay, cool, piranhas, all right, and then just takes a swan dive right into the middle of it. Like,
there's a live action movie that really pokes a lot of fun at the rule of cool for you're gonna laugh when I bring this movie up, because there's a sequence of challenges that this character, this mysterious hooded character, has to deal with. It's the Princess Bride, and that this character that's built up as we don't even know if they're the Dread Pirate Roberts, just the Man in Black and stuff, and they're having to overcome this swordsman. But then there's all this hilarious, goofy fun that comes along with it as well, to where you're thinking like, wait, this isn't breaking me out of my immersion, but it's rule of cool and it's funny.
Right.
And it keeps going back and forth on that. And that's where I think actually some of my favorite rule of cool moments actually in anime come from, are from comedies that blend the funny with the rule of cool, like Konosuba.
Sure. Well, Konosuba, absolutely. And here's another one. Yeah, but here's another one. Okay. In Bleach, one of my favorite rule of cool moments in Bleach is not
Kenpachi.
Not Kenpachi.
Oh, okay.
It's not Ichigo fighting Byakuya.
Nope.
But it's close to that point. It's when Ichigo appears.
Oh, yes!
And then he grabs Rukia and he throws her like a football. That was...
Or when he beats the three lieutenants, like, two or three sequences.
He's like way far away and suddenly he's there and then just... That was so awesome. But that was a serious thing, though.
That was a very serious thing.
But with the Rukia thing, it's a rule of cool moment, because how would he possibly do that? And it's also, okay, he's gotten way more powerful and all that stuff, right? But it's also absolute comedy because Rukia is like,
wait, what are you doing?
What are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And then Renji's just like, uh-oh. Photonium123, thank you so much for the follow. Glad to have you here. Oh, but back onto the whole thing of Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Princess Bride did rule of cool and comedy, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like that originally.
Oh, in the book.
The book, if you love Princess Bride, okay, if you haven't seen Princess Bride, you should watch it. It's a hilarious, amazing movie. So cheesy and just so great.
Yeah, so quotable.
Oh my gosh. But the book
is completely
different. It's completely different.
It's an epic.
Everything that happens in the movie, in the book, is instead serious.
It's
absolutely serious.
Like the quicksand.
The quicksand and everything. Yeah. And Fezzik and Vicini and Inigo and even Prince Humperdinck.
Yeah.
Even Prince Humperdinck was supposed to be this barrel-chested, super awesome, like he can track a falcon on a cloudy day, all that stuff. And the thing is, I think that's a great example of the rule of cool, both in the book and in the movie. Because in the book, they're like, okay, we're going for a certain audience that is going to find this cool. In the movie, they're like, okay, that's cool. We're going to do one better. We're going to expand the net of the audience of people that can enjoy this movie by basically taking all the serious stuff and putting it in there, but also throwing in so much comedy throughout it that if for some reason the stuff that they're doing isn't inherently cool, that's fine, because they're going to be laughing so much along the way that it doesn't matter. They will be accepting of it because they've got a smile on their face.
Yep, great point. And yeah, this all comes back to showing that basically anime deftly hands this by just the entire medium being anime. And then they just take it into extremes here and there for the purpose of the rule of cool. So, guys, all in all, the whole thing of our suspension of disbelief being something that we, have to, we have to have in order to truly be entertained by something like anime is not, it's not anything new. That's very much an obvious thing, but it's something that's been around for entertainment since forever. So when we go into rule of cool things, that's when basically things go to the extremes. And I think it is something specifically with us that, it's easy for us to not necessarily understand the extremes, because the extremes can suddenly come out of left field, based on our perceptions. But also the whole rule of cool thing is extremely subjective.
Yep.
What one person finds cool, another person doesn't find cool. What one person finds hilarious, another person doesn't find hilarious. So if anything, this is where I think our approach to anime has always been kind of to find the gold, find the nuggets within the anime itself. And of course find, entertainment value from it. But if we're watching something that we're like, oh, this is something that we can see how it's intended to be viewed. I think
Exactly.
JoJo's is a great example of this. Like when I first started with JoJo's, and we're in part 1, we're getting to meet Jonathan Joestar and Dio. Kono Dioda. They're so over the top. They're so over the top that it was something that I'm like, okay, I guess that is this show. And so I tuned my brain to be accepting of that in this show. But, you know, you're not going to expect that necessarily when you watch, you know, Hunter x Hunter or MHA.
Right, and that's one of the things about JoJo's is because it does it to such an extreme, you know very clearly that this is the kind of show it is, and that's the mood you're supposed to be in.
Right.
This was amazing. Basically, the rule of cool is passionately doing something objectively stupid with great confidence.
Yeah, Gurren Lagann.
Basically.
Yeah.
Or kill a kill.
It's stufective.
It's
stupid but effective. Yep. To quote Arcada.
Or ghost story.
Ghost stories. Did someone say that in chat? Did someone say ghost stories? Oh man, ghost stories dub. Oh, it's beautiful. So Mugetsu, good. Thank you so much for the follow.
Hey,
glad to have you
reference.
here. Yeah. Oh man. But okay, so guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for watching our podcast. Guys, make sure to check out our channel on YouTube, Semblance of Sanity, if you're not a usual
if you somehow got here.
If you somehow got here and you're like, oh, these guys are
channel.
kind of interesting. But check us out there. We do anime reactions, reviews, discussions, and all the like there. Tomorrow,
manga reading tomorrow, 3 p.m.
Berserk Volume 11.
Volume 11?
I think it is, yeah.
Dang.
Volume 11.
It's going by so fast.
Yeah, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Going to be doing some kind of gaming thing with me. By the way, guys, we're going to be building our new computers soon. So Jacob and I might eventually be able to do some more intensive gaming streams at some point.
The promised
Divinity Original Sin 2 one.
Oh, yeah. And Battle Lines is
when's the book
coming.
dropping?
So no official release date yet, because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff and all that, but I am currently working on getting all the pre-order stuff lined up.
Yep.
So that way you guys can do that and get your copy marked for whatever
so
that
that he knows what to deal with the
how many copies to
distribution
get and all that stuff
and all that.
Because there's a lot of things that go into like just getting like not the story but just the physical book aspect all done.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Are you guys planning on doing IPPO more than once a week? No, we will probably never do another anime more than once a week.
Yeah,
sorry to say, but probably never again.
Yep.
If
you want more info on the book, website link in the description. You can get to.
It's on YouTube. But
yeah.
Our website is in the description of any of our YouTube videos, and from there you can sign up for the newsletter and get book info from him. Awesome. So guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Be sure to follow, like, comment, and subscribe. If you are actually a Twitch subscriber, just know that you get access to our Discord, so be sure to get access to that through the sub room.
Yes.
And then sync your Discord and Twitch accounts together, so you get the purple Twitch subscriber role, and you can hang out and chat with us just about stories or whatever. And if any of that interests you, we'll see you there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.